I'd like to introduce Jocelyn Dalton, without whom this event could not have happened. Ms. Dalton is the Manager of Digital Media Strategy at ESPN, focusing on business and content for ESPN.com, ESPN the magazine, mobile, and digital video. She attended the University of Nebraska on a track scholarship and earned her BA in Communications Studies. She earned a master's at the University of Central Florida in Sports Business Management. It was there that she studied under Dr. Richard Lapchick, an internationally recognized expert in issues of race, gender, and diversity in sports. She joined ESPN in 2011 as Associate Manager for ESPNW, which is ESPN's first business dedicated to female athletes and fans. Please let us welcome Jocelyn Dalton.
Well, thank you, John, for that warm introduction. On behalf of today's panelists and myself, we would just like to extend our appreciation to the Schieffer School of Journalism as well as TCU's athletic department. We've enjoyed going back to school with you in a few classes and spending time with your athletic department. Thank you especially to you, Kim, for this afternoon. We had an opportunity to tour your facilities, and I must say we definitely smelled the roses. I am truly honored to have brought with me such a talented group of women for today's panel, and I'm humbled to be teammates with such well-respected leaders in the sports industry. Well, I'll have them each introduce themselves here shortly, and then we'll jump into what hopes to be a robust discussion, followed by your questions. I'd like to take a moment to set the stage for today's symposium. One might wonder, with the rapid advance of women in today's society, is a panel on women as journalists really necessary? Why not have a panel of talented journalists, not talented women journalists? But to shed light on the reality of today's landscape, one only needs to look no further than a study that's going to be coming out later this week by Richard Lapchick's Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports. It was in this race and gender report card that some staggering statistics were shared. Just yesterday, Dr. Lapchick wrote a column for the Sports Business Journal. Well, he shined a light on what the 2011-2012 study showed. Now, the Race and Gender Report Card is an assessment of hiring practices for women and people of color, giving them an A, B, C, D, or F ranking in terms of players, coaches, and front office administrators in our country's leading sport organizations, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, MLS, WNBA, NCAA Athletics, and the Associated Press. I'd like to point out that the Associated Press's ranking report card is compiled data from newspaper and online journalism. It does not cover television and production. When the very first Associated Press report card was issued in 2006, Dr. Lapchick called it the most discouraging of all the racial and gender report cards. Today, he still finds it that way. You can take a look at this slide to see some of the results from the study. We noticed that the percentages of women in key positions is increasing, is improving, and we can also take a look at the percentages of white employees in key positions. So what does this mean for you as aspiring journalists and future business leaders in the room today? Clearly, there is work to be done. And opportunities such as this symposium, spurred on for all of you by Director Lumpkin and Mr. Rob King, are significant because we are here today to show you the other part of this statistics story. My team consists of 5 incredible examples of women making waves and rising through the industry ranks. They are well respected, they are dedicated workers. They've worked their way to the front of a press conference, and they've boxed out with their elbows up in meetings to get their opinions heard. They are journalists who have made their footprint in our industry regardless of their race and regardless of their gender. With that, let's get started. Go ahead and start off, Jamil. Tell us a little bit about yourself
Okay.
and your role.
My name is Jamel Hill. I'm an ESPN columnist and TV talking head. I appear on a variety of shows from First Take to Around the Horn to Sports Reporters. I've been at ESPN now for 7 years, and I got there pretty much the usual way, voodoo pictures and witchcraft. So, no, but I'm happy to be at a company like ESPN, and what Jocelyn didn't point out about those very grim statistics is that if you took ESPN out of the equation, because we have, as you can see, just based off this panel here, we have a large percentage of the female sports columnists, female sports editors, and people of color in this industry. And so, for example, we're in the category, the A circulation category, and there are 35 sports columnists, female sports columnists in this category. We have 23 of them. So we have really made diversity a company emphasis. And I certainly, when I interviewed there in 2006, that was one of the things that really struck me, was how many women, people of color, just how much regional ethnic diversity that ESPN offered. Ms. Jane.
All right, good. Hi, I'm Jane McManus. I'm also at ESPN. I've been there for about 3 years. I cover the Jets during the NFL season, which is a laugh a minute. It's always fun. It's a roller coaster. You never know what's going to happen next. And then after the NFL season is over, I predominantly work for ESPNW, which is a part of our business that's dedicated to female athletes and also to the female sports fan. We try to get coverage and tailor it to what you guys want to read. And that's a lot of fun. Also, it allows me to write kind of longer form stories, do features, do columns also, in addition to just the nuts and bolts of the daily deadline writing that comes along with the Jets. So I get a little bit of everything.
I'm Lori Higginbotham. I am the multimedia producer for ESPN the magazine. So I handle the online rollout, the iPad app, and our new part in the Windows 8 app. I do a lot of developing in addition to just making the print stories come alive in the rest of the ESPN world. And I've only been at ESPN for 2 years. I graduated from grad school in 2011, so I can speak to a little bit about getting your foot in the door, because I've got one foot in the door, shoving it.
I just got my foot in the door, actually. Last year, it's only been a year that I've been at ESPN. My name is Michelle Steele, and I'm one of the anchors and reporters for ESPN Digital. So I do everything from the fantasy football podcast or a fantasy basketball segment that you'll see online or on your phone. I feel like I have some license here to live tweet. Is that okay? Is that fine? Since, we're all representing the future.
As long as you use the hashtag, which is hashtag TCUESPN.
Yes,
Right.
Nice plug. And I like to say that I just kind of keep things interesting. I do reports for a number of TV shows on ESPN, including Outside the Lines and Sports Center, and then on the digital side, I do anchoring and I do interviewing.
I'm Jenna Janovi. Oh, yeah. I oversee the Enterprise and Investigations Unit for ESPN.com. I also oversee the integration of long-form journalism on digital platforms. So I work closely with ESPN the magazine, E60, Outside the Lines, the Television Features Unit, ESPN Deportes, radio, and mobile to deliver long-form storytelling wherever it is that you want to engage with it. I've been there about 6.5 years, Nebraska native, worked in newspapers most of my career until moving to digital 6.5 years ago. An all cops courts beat writer, covered city hall, county government. So I came to sports later in my career and am thoroughly enjoying my opportunities at ESPN to do long-form journalism.
Thank you. I'd just like to hear from all of you as well in terms of how you feel your career path, being in a male-dominated industry, how you've influenced it or been influenced yourself as a woman.
Well, I think, obviously when you go to events, and we've all been in probably situations where you're the only female in the locker room or the only woman at the press conference. And, it's just something that you just kind of understand is a part of the job. I was fortunate because when I first decided to make sports my career path, which was in high school, my very first mentor was a female sports journalist named Jonette Howard, who is also a columnist at ESPN. And so I never thought that I couldn't do this. That never entered my mind. I was certainly aware that there wasn't a litany of women that did what I wanted to do, but I always had the confidence that I could achieve some of my goals and be a leader in this industry, and I wasn't going to be held back by my gender directly anyway, despite what those, I guess, statistics say. So for me, I think if you're coming into this profession, you have to be very confident in yourself. You have to understand that, viewers and listeners, readers, because you're the woman, they're going to pick on you. If I get a statistic wrong about Barry Bonds, first thing somebody's going to say is because I'm a woman and I don't know what I'm talking about. And you have to kind of get accustomed to dealing with a higher level of scrutiny, understanding that you don't have the luxury of representing yourself. You're representing the collective. It's not just if I don't know what I'm talking about, that's why women shouldn't be in sports if I make a mistake or if something happens. So for me, I'm okay with shouldering those responsibilities because I like to think that somewhere out there, and certainly this is represented by so many women in this audience, is able to derive something out of seeing me up here and knowing that if you have the dream or idea that you would like to go into sports and to be in the positions that we're in, then hopefully in some small way you'll see that that path is not blocked just because of your gender.
When I first started working in the business, I went to an autograph signing as a reporter to kind of get a quote from one of the athletes there. That's a common assignment. And so it was Cecil Fielder, and I walked up to him, and he took my pen, and he tried to sign my notebook. And I said, no, I'm a reporter. I'm here to interview you. And he was like, oh, okay. But, it's moments like that where you realize, that, maybe you're not seen as a reporter in the same way that other people are. But, I think that to be a woman in this business, and this is the honest truth, I really do believe this, I feel like you really have to turn off some of the socialization. If you have your ears perked to every single comment that someone else is going to make, if you are completely aware that you're kind of the odd man out in a situation, if you feel like you're nervous about approaching somebody to get a story or to get an interview, I mean, that's going to work against you. You have to think of yourself as the reporter, not as the woman reporter or to worry about socially where you fit in a situation. And I think that we all have to kind of be a little bit off in a way to be in this business and to do this job. And I think that's part of it, is not worrying so much about what the rest of the world thinks. You worry about what you're doing and the job that you're doing, and the rest will fall into place.
And I think that my experience, at least in the last couple of years of being in locker rooms, I feel like my male colleagues have been really supportive more often than not. If anything, you do get, and it's not in a condescending or a patronizing way, in fact, it's just like, hey, you're new to the beat, this is who you need to talk to. It's been really, I think, from my standpoint, being in the Jets locker room a couple of years ago, where it is, I will say, it is maybe a laugh a second, but I feel like it's been very encouraging in the last couple of years among the male reporters as far as how they interact and the dynamic with female reporters. I don't know if you guys have had that experience as well.
I think once you establish yourself, people take you seriously and they give you the same kind of help. I think it's the first time you walk into a room in a new situation, people are like, why is she here? Why was she hired? Yeah. But you still do get that sometimes. But I agree. I mean, other colleagues can be just as great to you as they are with other people, or just as terrible, which is a good thing. You're on an equal playing field.
Equal opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then with Jenna and Lori, they serve more, Jenna obviously being an editor over the enterprise, but they're also in management and office positions, Jenna as the lead editor, and Lori with our associate digital. How do you guys see the influence of women in the office and in your roles in more management rather than...
Okay, so good question. And being sort of the veteran, I think, on the panel, I have come from not only a place of having faced, sort of encountered things along the way, but also had a chance to see the evolution and I think emergence of strong and vocal women who are making their way in this world in an extremely constructive, positive way, having influence on not just other people who are in management, but helping to mentor other young women who are coming up in the business as well. I think that's the change that I've seen in nearly 25 years in the business, having looked for mentors myself and having looked for women in positions of leadership and fortunately having a really amazing one at the Omaha World Herald years and years and years ago. Deanna Sands was our managing editor at the time, and she was a wonderful mentor. And I think of Deanna all the time thinking, well, gosh, now I'm sort of in Deanna's place, and hopefully I'll be able to provide that sort of leadership and guidance to the next generation of young women. So I think that was what I have seen as a change over time.
Yeah, I think coming into the industry, in the last 2 or 3 years, I have sort of a different experience with ESPN versus the ESPN 20 years ago, because I know it did have a reputation of being very, male-dominated and kind of a boys' club. But in my experience, especially at the magazine, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're a good journalist and you work really hard and you're persistent. But you have to be persistent if you're a male journalist too. And I have never seen any doors close from being a woman, nor have I seen any extra doors open. It's just, you're just there. You're an ESPN employee like everyone else. And I think that, to a certain extent, I think a lot of the women in this room who are going into the industry, now in the next couple of years, may never have that awkward locker room experience because the way has sort of been paid for us by the Jamels and the Janes and the Jennas of the sports world. We are so lucky in that these women have come before us, that we can just, we work hard and we're just journalists. We're just here telling stories like everybody else.
Can I just point out I'm not that old?
I never said you were old.
Oh, as me? You're not as old as me?
Just saying.
Okay.
It's like paved the way.
I'm not saying you're old.
Well, the Christine Brennans and the Leslie Vissers.
Okay.
No, for sure. But yeah, and there were women before us too, who, like,
Yes,
when I called
definitely.
Leslie Visser to ask her about some stuff, she was always willing to listen to anyone. And that was so important to know that, that those women were there and they were able to provide kind of a mentorship role.
Jane, this question is for you. Being with the Jets since 1998, how could you say the league, the NFL, has evolved in terms of their women journalists and the way that they're allowing women in to cover sports? Have you seen a change at the league level?
Well, I was with the Jets the year of Inez Sainz, and she was the Mexican TV reporter who showed up at a practice, and the coaches very unprofessionally threw balls in her direction. She was hooted at in the locker room, and this got out, and the NFL, kind of investigated the Jets for this, and it caused a big brouhaha, and it made it very difficult for the women who were covering the team that year. It was a kind of a difficult place to be just because of all of the scrutiny, even though I wasn't there that day that it happened, but it certainly cast a shadow over the team that year. Now, and the NFL, I think, and I don't think they came out, the NFL decided to institute a program where they did seminars for teams on sexual harassment. And that I think that really, it was not a great situation. But I think what happened is that the Jets had to really look at kind of the professional environment that it had in the locker room and that it provides for women. And I think that kind of made the NFL think about that too. And I don't think it's ever been an unprofessional situation, really, aside from that day. It was kind of funny to me that it happened to the Jets because the Jets had always been really great to me. I'd always felt like they didn't, make a distinction male-female, that it was just, you were a reporter and they hated you all. I'm kidding about that. But so to me, I think it heightened the awareness that you need to treat reporters as reporters and not as male reporters or female reporters. And it definitely, made it awkward at first, but I think ultimately it's made it a better place to be.
Great. And piggybacking off of female reporters in the football industry, Jamil, you've obviously established yourself as one of ESPN's most provocative, popular and versatile on-air personalities. You have a distinguished career as a columnist, but this past year you decided to test your talent as a sideline reporter for college football. Can you take us through your decision to join the sidelines, especially since many sideline reporters actually lack that experience as a columnist and the talent that you had behind what you brought?
It was a weird, I sort of did it in reverse, I guess, if you could say. Yeah, you're right, there's usually not a lot of sideline reporters. Lisa Salters is probably an exception because she was a news reporter at ABC, and she covered like the OJ trial, and I think she covered a war too. I'm not sure which one, but she has a very lengthy resume as a news reporter. But for me, it was completely different. And before I got to ESPN, I also spent a long career in newspapers. I was in newspapers for 10 years. I covered college football and college basketball for 6 of those years. I was a columnist, a general assignment sports reporter. So to me, my thought process was I wanted to kind of expand my portfolio. I'm a big believer in doing things that make you uncomfortable, because that's the only way you grow, is if it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I wanted to get back to covering live events. Doing in-studio stuff is great, and it certainly helped me blossom on the television side of things, but it does keep you away from the subjects you discuss and even the games you talk about. There's nothing like covering a live game. And I really, those opportunities were sort of dwindling for me at ESPN because I was doing so much more studio work. So here was an opportunity to kind of provide the best of both worlds. I could be on TV, I could do live sporting events, and get to see a different perspective. And it was hard. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard going in, and it was harder than I even thought it was going to be. I talked to Lisa before I went out. I talked to Shelley Smith, and they gave me some great pointers. And I told them, my only question to them was, tell me all the things that you wish somebody would have told you before your first sideline assignment. And I never Shelley Smith told me to wrap my notes in plastic, because if it rains, then I don't want all my notes getting, blurry and everything. And Lisa was telling me that, you have to understand everything that you say to the producer is based off the view from the broadcast booth. So if I say, near side, 50-yard line, such and such is puking in a bucket, then then they automatically know, okay, this side of the field, so it's this language that you have to learn. And unlike in the studio where they have to come to you on the sidelines, they don't, other than you have your pregame hit, halftime interview, post-game interview. Those are only 3 sort of guaranteed hits. Everything else that happens in game, you have to sell to your producer, which is completely different. So I had these notes upon notes upon notes. And, it would be considered a successful game if I got to do, maybe if I had 6 or 7 hits in an entire game. That would be a great game. When I'm used to, doing, like First Take, doing a 2-hour program where I'm talking for 2 straight hours. So it was definitely very different. And the games, they can't be scripted. I mean, anything can happen. You're reporting in inclement weather. I had some very cold games where it was 30 degrees. I had some rainy games. The second game was Hurricane Isaac. They came through, they got remnants in Louisville, so I spent the entire game on the sideline in a poncho with my ankle deep in water. Never wear any cute shoes on the sideline. Yeah, I only wear cute shoes for the opening hit, and then those babies are coming off. So, so you have to kind of balance this line between comfort and style, if you will. And, the whole game, you're walking back and forth. You're looking for things that don't fit. You're looking for oddities, observations, moods, so it becomes a lesson in psychology as much as it is, in watching the game and figuring out what's happening football-wise. So it really stretched me. I'm really happy I did it. I would definitely do it again. I hope to be able to do it again, this fall, and it just
should tweet that. You heard it here, breaking news.
No, I said I hope to do it again. Okay, I can't hire myself. I hope to do it again. I hope it wasn't so terrible they won't ask me back. But yeah, it was a struggle. And the other thing too is like I don't have the greatest memory in the world, and I'll admit like when you're in studio, when you're giving your opinion, that's one thing. It's your opinion. You're in studio, you read the teleprompter because you have all your stuff in there. That's one thing. You gotta recover when you gotta recite like 7 or 8 important stats in a hit. That can be a little challenging to remember. I was like, man, I need some memory techniques here. I can't remember anything. So yeah, it just really taught me to think even faster on my feet.
Thank you. And Michelle, the majority of your world is also spent on camera. And not only are you an anchor, but you have a background in economics. So you have this opportunity to cover sports business as well. I'm curious if you can shine a light on what it's like to be a female anchor, especially a female anchor with business knowledge.
It's pretty good. I would say. Three things actually about that. One is I have sort of an unusual background for sure for sports because I did major in business undergrad. And the reason I did that is because I just happened to like my econ classes a lot. I know that it sounds crazy, but I really did. And my parents were like, this is great. You should keep that major. You can go work at a bank. We know that you want to do journalism, but worst comes to worst, you can work at a bank because there's money inside the bank. So I ended up actually interning at Merrill Lynch for a summer in Chicago, where I'm from. And I liked it, but I wasn't in love with it, But I came to know Bloomberg there, and I ended up working for Bloomberg TV right before ESPN. And Bloomberg's great because it's the kind of organization where you can be trained across all media. It's more of a data company than a news company, and so people wear a bunch of different hats there. So I ended up working for Bloomberg Television, but I learned radio, I learned web, I learned digital. It was great, and that's where I made the move to sports as well because they had just started this company, Bloomberg Sports. So that's sort of my background. That's the one facet that I wanted to hit on with my economics background. The second facet I wanted to hit on, though, is that for any journalist, it's so important to know that the industry is in the midst of massive change. You all know what's going on with the newspapers. That's been covered for years now. But everything is shifting to digital and mobile, and nobody, even the people who are working on the digital side, aren't really sure how we're going to consume news in the next 2, 3, 5 years. I know at SportsCenter, they started a SportsCenter Twitter feed that you can find on ESPN.com, shameless plug alert. And that's one way that people are consuming news. Even the way that SportsCenter is produced right now assumes that you've probably already seen the highlight. So then what? Now we have to look at analysis. We have to look at new ways to actually deliver what's going on to make the content compelling. So for me, being on the digital side of the business is very exciting and something that I would recommend anybody who is just starting out in this field to 100% pursue, even for on-camera work. The third thing, sports business. The third thing is, with any big story in sports, I would say 90% of the time, the connective tissue tends to be money. Whether it's Darrelle Revis and his contract negotiations, Tom Brady leaving money on the table with the Patriots, TCU joining the Big 12 last year or 2 years ago, whenever that was. Was that the Big 12 shout out? Yeah, it is about the money. And that athletic department here at the Horned Frogs, you can bet dollars to donuts. I don't know, that's a Midwestern saying. That they had the money first and foremost when they decided to join that conference. And that's just, it's just good to know, and it's going to make your content really pop if you know what's really going on. And more often than not, what's really going on is there's some money changing hands. So
thank you. Yeah. Based on your second point, which is this change in our industry and us kind of needing to evolve, but not exactly sure where it's going. Lori, in your job, you're responsible for taking ESPN the magazine as a print property and transferring it to life in our digital world through .com. And in doing this, you also are responsible for ESPN's Mag app on the iPad. Also a shameless plug. Yeah. Can you tell us, obviously in your background with your schooling, tell us about your background with school, and then if you had training for how to build the iPad app, how your training worked in terms of understanding how to take this content and evolve it.
First, I will say that I was in a magazine program at NYU. It's a really good program, another plug. But
I think they're already taken in this room.
Oh, I know. I don't know if you know now. But when I was in grad school, it was very much the print is dead mentality, and they were very, you need to learn these digital skills, you need to learn how to do this. And I noticed a lot of the people in my program were not as eager to learn to code and stuff like that, because it's not as glamorous as being, on the camera or being the one interviewing. But I really liked it, and I liked being, behind the computer and doing it. So I learned to code. I learned Java. I learned CSS. They did a great job of offering enough electives where if you wanted to learn, you could. And so, as many digital classes, multimedia reporting as you guys can take, I completely recommend it, because I was able to get a job straight out of grad school with the magazine, and I got hired to run this iPad app that had literally just been developed and had one person in the office working on it, and then we had a third-party developer who kind of built it for us. And so after we made the move to Bristol, the magazine, that person left, and so the whole magazine app was in my lap, and it was terrifying. But we were able to evolve it, and it's a pretty robust app. It's pretty good. And we also were able to integrate our content with ESPN.com, just making it come alive, as much as possible. But that being said, a lot of what I do and a lot of what I learned was self-taught. I had to kind of learn it by doing it and by messing up the iPad app over and over and over. So in the last year, if you downloaded it and it crashed, then it's my fault. So I'm really sorry.
So that was you.
That was me. Actually, if you open it now and it's not working, it's still me. So if you can tell me and not tweet it, it would be great. Appreciate it. But a lot of it's self-taught, and it's just being really eager to learn all parts of journalism. I don't think you can go into the industry now and say, I'm going to be a print editor, and I'm going to edit long-form journalism stories in the magazine, and that's it. I don't think that's really a feasible option anymore. But it's so exciting, and it's so exciting to be, at the front of this, and that's what everybody in this room is going to be. You guys are going to be at the very front of this, like Michelle said, this totally changing world.
Yeah, I have a friend at Google, actually, and they're developing products there where in the future, and I think this is a Minority Report, but in the future, they're experimenting right now with wearable content almost, where you'd wear a device and it would be able to tell where you are. It would use some geolocation technology, and it would say, hey, 10% off, as you're walking into Starbucks or wherever, yeah. And then they would give you a headline, like a news headline about the coffee that day or something.
Well, have you seen the Google glasses that you can wear?
That sounds so
you go to the stadium.
That's awesome.
Right, you go to the stadium and they'll tell you Jay Cutler is injured or whatever.
Right.
I think staying in that same vein of how we're reading content and how we're receiving content, Jenna, a question for you. As a leader of our enterprise journalism, long-form journalism, how we read it, the design around it, has also gone through a recent shift. Can you talk about how ESPN is aligning design with our content and the stories that we're telling?
We have, in the past year and a half or so, taken a bit of a different approach in terms of design with our long-form pieces, thanks to John Korpik's new VP for design, print, and digital. He's come in and been very aggressive and pushed us to think differently about what we can do and how we can do it, and what the reading experience can be and how elegant it can be. And so we have we've experimented a couple of times with some formats, some parallax scrolling, some different ways of presenting video and photos to try and enhance the reading experience. I think we've had some success. Particularly, there was a story that we did last summer on Doc Ellis, who famously or infamously pitched a game while high on LSD. And we presented that in a different format than I think we had ever used before, and it was received fairly well. And we did a story also on Leo Messi. Wright Thompson's story on Leo Messi was also presented in a different format. So John has really come in and encouraged us to think differently about what we can do and how we can present those pieces. And it's been a great challenge for us because we not only have to make sure that you can read it on your laptop, but you can read it on your iPad or whatever reader you have, and you can read it on your mobile phone. And so there are all kinds of tests that have to take place to make sure that when we ship content out, that you can actually read it. So we've had some challenges with that, but we've had some real opportunities to learn from that. And I think we're heading in a really great direction. There's some other folks who are doing some amazing work in this regard too. If you haven't seen the New York Times piece on the avalanche at Tunnel Creek, you have to go find that piece online. It's an amazing piece that John Branch did that integrates long-form text with multimedia elements and moving maps and enhanced video. It's really a compelling piece, and took what we did with Doc Ellis and just blew it out of the water and just made it infinitely more amazing in terms of a format. So. And
Jenna, also in your role with Longform, you work in strong collaboration with Outside the Lines and E60, which exists as ESPN's opportunity to tell stories beyond the game. I'm curious in your role as an editor in terms of working with writers. How do you help your writers strike a balance with telling a story versus supporting or discouraging?
Well, it would be easy to think that a cause is either good or bad. And I think what we do when any idea surfaces is we have a real vigorous conversation about that idea and what it can be, what the story really can be, what different angles, what different approaches, what are the different voices we need to have in that particular story. We need to have a diversity of thoughts and feelings, and I think our reporters are veteran enough that they know that they personally can't be advocates themselves for a particular cause other than the cause of the truth that emerges from great journalism. And so I think the notion of advocacy journalism, there's certainly a role for that in our universe, and I certainly read it when I get a chance. But I also think that there's a responsibility that we have to share both sides of the story, multiple sides of the story. I think our reporters are veteran enough that they are certainly capable of doing that. And we have multiple layers of editors as well who are backstops to that. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of folks who are reading our stories before they ever get sent to the out to users to read. So we have lots of eyes on things before they get public. And so if there is a question about something, we have a pretty good collection of people who are looking.
You know, that is so important. That is something I think it's worth noting has changed in the last couple of years when it comes to journalism. There are not as many editors, and a lot of times if you're blogging or you're doing something on your own, you don't have somebody else looking at it. I would suggest that everybody seek out an independent editor that you know if you're going to try publishing, because it is the role, I think, has become more important than ever, but kind of less seen as important.
So far today, we learned about these women's backgrounds, some of the things they do in their daily roles, how they've gotten there. As we wrap up here with a couple more questions before we throw to the audience, I'd like to hear from each of you. What's one piece of advice that you, if you were a student in the audience today, based on what you've learned, that you could share with them?
assume that means you're starting with me. Okay.
You can go in any order you'd like.
Happy to start.
Yes, go ahead.
Learn the business. Not just learn the journalism, the reporting, and the writing, and the editing, and the video skills, and all of the things that go into creating the content. Learn the business. I wish somebody had said to me 25 years ago, if you're getting into journalism, to learn the business. Understand what traffic is. Understand how advertising works. Understand what kinds of decisions are being made in the business offices. Understand what goes into supporting the work that you're doing. You're out there spending resources. You're spending money on travel, covering events. You're going places, doing things. Your content certainly is being consumed, read, commented on, that sort of thing. But it's the folks on the business side of the operation who are working really, really hard to make it possible for you to be able to do a lot of things that you can do. So learn the business. Understand what happens on the other side. You don't have to necessarily go work for that other side, but learn it, understand it, and don't be afraid to ask. Learn the business. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. One, bring a sweater to every studio you go to. I'm regretting that today. And two, find a niche. You know, sports and television are two intensely competitive industries. And if you can do something that will differentiate yourself outside of, oh, I'm a huge sports fan, I'm a big sports nut, it's going to benefit you immeasurably. And for me, it happened to be business. But it can be anything. It can be, you know, we all know that health and safety is the NFL's #1 issue. If you're a concussions expert, if you know a lot about that side of the story, you're just going to stand out that much more.
I would say it's hard to work really hard. I think that the one thing that they told us at the beginning of grad school, Meryl Gordon, who was my mentor there, she's a fantastic journalist, she said, if you feel like you're in the wrong place and you're not right for this job and you can't deal with it, then you actually are in the right place, because it's hard and there's no magical gene that makes you good in this industry. It's just working and working for it. And in the end, it will pay off. But if you want it, you have to work for it.
I will say that I think if you're in this business to meet athletes or coaches and be liked, you're in the wrong business. Your job is not to be liked. As a matter of fact, sometimes they may hate you. And that means you're doing a good job, believe it or not. So, I mean, my thing is questions. I think that a lot of the journalists that I've seen, the younger journalists that I've seen, are afraid to open their mouth and ask questions. They're afraid that it's going to elicit some sort of negative response from a coach or from an athlete. That's okay. You have to ask the tough questions. That's why you're there. Don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to find your voice.
And to piggyback on that real quick, you know who broke the Manti Te'o story? It was 2 college journalists, just so you know. I would say it's if I gave 3 bits of advice, number 1, and I stole this from Jay-Z, hustlers never sleep. Hustlers never sleep. While it may be the thing about this lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle to a large degree, is that you have to make a lot of sacrifices. And you have to make these sacrifices when everyone else is having the time of their lives. And at that stage, it may seem like you're giving up so much, but trust me, it pays off. You know, when I was in high school, I worked in the sports department at the Free Press. I gave up every Thursday and Friday night of my junior and senior year to answer phones in the sports department. When I was in college, while everybody else was going and taking these grand summer vacations and spending 3 months just not doing anything, I was on an internship. When I first got out of the business or got out of college, you know, everybody was trying to pinpoint where they wanted to live and say, oh, I'm only going to take a job that's on the East Coast or on the West Coast. I didn't care as long as it was a job. I wound up working in Raleigh. I live in Orlando, even though I'm from Detroit. This is like the 5th city I've lived in. So you can't be afraid to make a sacrifice that's going to ultimately lead to a better future. I would also add that even though, as we saw from the video, that technology is changing very rapidly, and these changes, I think, are exciting. The basics don't change. You have to know how to report. You have to know how to source, develop relationships. That part of the business will stand the test of time. So don't get so caught up in the technology that you forget what the basics are. And at this stage in your career, that's the most important thing you need to learn. You don't have to worry about being on TV, getting famous, none of that. Tell me something I didn't know and gather some information real fast. You know how to do those two things, you'll always have a job. Third thing I would say is that bigger is not always better. Of course, that's easy for me to say. I'm at ESPN, and we're all there, and we love the company. However, it's not a fit for everybody. And just because somebody has a big name, it may not be the fit for you. They may not develop you. I know a lot of you are thinking, when I graduated from school, I'd love to work at a company like ESPN. That worked for you because of the line of business that you were going in. That's one of those positions that's in the fast track mode, where if you come in and let's say you want to be a producer or whatever, but before you marry yourself to a company and think, oh, I want to work there, you better figure out how they're going to develop you. If they're not going to develop you, make you better, give you something that you can walk away with, be it a demo reel or more something added to your portfolio, don't work there. Just having a name on your resume doesn't mean anything if you have no results in production.
Wow. And my final question before we go to the audience is perhaps maybe the hardest one of the evening. What legacy do you hope to leave behind in journalism?
Yikes. Okay. All right, I'll take this first. We'll go this way. I'll give you a break. Okay. Well, the legacy, it's really a simple one for me. I never said, like, I got to win a Pulitzer Prize before I left this profession. I just want, when people look back on me, that they can say, she operated and did her job with integrity. Your reputation is everything. I value that more than, winning any award or some of the other journalistic accolades that may come along, because especially if you're a woman in this business, you probably have to take care of your reputation more so than your male colleagues. And so for me, my reputation, my word, and my integrity is everything, and I never want that to be compromised.
I think that I would like to be somebody remembered as who did my job well, broke stories, but held the door open for the women to come behind me. I feel like, there are a lot of us in the business who want to be seen as a good journalist first, not necessarily a male or female journalist. I'm certainly one of those. But I also don't want to forget that women opened this door for me to be able to have this job. I'm in a position now where hopefully I can hold that door open.
I think one of the foundations of this whole industry is telling stories, and I have always just wanted to be someone who told those stories, and the way I'm doing it now is through ESPN.com and through the technology. And I mean, at the magazine we write about sports, but we are telling stories through the lens of sports. And I just think that it's so important to transcend all those sports, fashion, whatever boundaries. You're storytellers, and you're just telling stories.
I actually wanted to echo Jamel's point as well. Your integrity and doing your job with integrity is what you have in this business, and your reputation is the most important thing. And I do tend to forget this when I'm on assignment, but is to have fun. It's sports. We're all doing this because it's a passion point for us. And if I can deliver the news or deliver a sports story in such a way that incites the same kind of passions that I feel in the viewers, then I think I've done my job well.
I don't know. I'm just going to go away. I wanted to change the world. I think you kind of get into this business thinking that you can change the world. You can have an impact on people. And I think that's the world I'm living in now of long-form journalism. My immediate goal, and I think it's going to be a lasting goal, is as things get faster and faster and the pace of news gets faster and faster, and we sort of live in a faster and faster world. My objective is to make you stop and to think and to read and to feel. And if I can do that and have an impact on you, I think that's what I'll be happiest about at the end of my career, which is much sooner than it will be for the rest of you. I think we all sort of have that sense that, if you're in the world of journalism, don't you sort of feel like you want to have an impact on people and do work that's lasting and that people remember. And I think that's ultimately what my hope would be.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open the floor for questions. We have a mic stationed, I believe. Is there a mic on the other side of this? Yes, lovely. We would love to hear your questions and provide any more insight on any topic we can for you. As someone's getting to the mic, I'll throw out just one more question for Jane. You mentioned that you not only are you covering men's sports, but you're also covering female athletes for ESPNW. Can you talk about what your work with ESPNW has been like in terms of that perspective?
It's been really interesting. I think some people when this started were like, why do you need a separate site in order to cover women's sports? Can't that just be covered in the regular site? That's certainly true, but you don't have a staff of people dedicated to looking for those stories in a regular site. And so ESPNW is an opportunity to really try to pull stories out and tease stories out because they relate to women or to female athletes. And that by nature is going to provide, more of a platform for those athletes, more storytelling opportunities for the women who play those games. And also, we do bring our own point of view sometimes to watching games. This is why diversity is so important on a newspaper staff, because people bring all sorts of different things to the table depending on their background, whatever their background's been, socioeconomic, sexual orientation, gender, race, everything. And you might just be looking in a corner that nobody else has looked in for a long time because they're focused over here. And so I think that it gives us an opportunity to kind of look around at things that might be interesting, to me in particular, that maybe somebody else wouldn't have really noticed before. So I think it's an important flag to plant at ESPN to say, we care about this, we're looking for this, we are paying attention.
As a female reporter in general, even in sports and anything, how do you balance professional life and family life?
Jane.
I have 2 kids, 10 and 8, and one thing I'll say is that this is funny because I think this is such a big question for women in our industry, for a lot of women in our industry. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of female reporters that I know, and there are a lot in New York, and a lot of them don't have kids, a lot of them don't have families. A lot of the pioneers in our business didn't have families. And I don't know that it's necessarily directly results of what they did for a living, but it is, I felt that I, for a time, was mommy tracked after I had my kids. I did it a little bit younger. I was 31 when I had my first child. She's now 10. Oh my goodness, I just gave her All right, that's okay. So, but I feel like it is definitely a delicate balance, right? Because I can't call my editor and be like, oh, I've got to pick up my daughter from the bus. And, you really can't do that as a professional in any industry. But at the same time, I think, I have picked a niche for myself where I don't have to travel quite as much as some other reporters. And that's important to me because I need to be there for my kids. And so I've been able to luckily carve out just like a kind of perfect little place for myself. I think it can be done. I really do believe it can be done. It's much harder. You're not going to cover the Yankees if you have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old at home. It's very difficult. It's a 3 million games in a season in baseball or something like that. It would be very, very difficult. So supportive people around you, I think, is very important. And kind of being just pretty confident about it. That's what I'm doing. There's never a perfect time. There's never a perfect situation if you want to have a career because there's always going to be some kind of impact back and forth. But I say be daring and go for it.
And I guess speaking for from the single side,
Just the rest of us.
non-children perspective, is I don't really have any work-life balance. Certainly, there are certain personal sacrifices you have to make if you want to be a sports reporter. Your weekends are no longer yours. The amount of sports programming I watch in a given week, because I'm rotating and doing so many different shows, in addition to writing a column, especially during football, it's got to be a good 40 to 50 hours of sports programming I'm watching a week. Easy. So I miss a lot of shows. Thank God for Netflix. Like, everybody's all in the scandal. I don't know. I think I saw the season 1. I have no idea what's going on. So you can give up, all these luxuries. You do have to give them up. But on the flip side, the benefit is, like, I got to cover the World Cup 2 years ago and spent 40 days in South Africa. That's the upside. I have an obsessive amount of frequent flyer miles right now. I'm actually, when I'm a long way away from 40. So I'm gonna, my 40th birthday gift to myself, which is a few years off. I'm going to, I have enough frequent flyer miles. I'm not that far away from purchasing a trip around the world. That's going to be my gift to myself, because I have spent, that's for all those trips back and forth. I have to go to Bristol, and I have a ridiculous amount of Marriott points because the residence in Southington and Bristol is my home away from home. So there's upsides and downsides, and certainly you're not going to be able to you're not going to be living the life of a 9-to-5 person. Even though newspapers, we are all under those that worked in it, you had the deadline crunch, and we have more time online. But the thing is, it also means you have 24-hour access. Like before, the paper had to close at a certain time. When you're working for an online entity, that does not happen. News does not shut off. So you have to get used to, I got to pick up and go cover this Yankees game on Friday because I got to fill in for such and such, or this big event is happening here, or this breaking news story. I don't know if we sent anybody to cover the Pistorius trial, but somebody's at some point is going to get that call and say, hey, we need you to go over to South Africa and do that. So you kind of have to get used to a life where you cannot really plan things. Or when I was a beat writer, I had to plan everything around the team I covered. I'm sure you have to do that with the Jets. Yeah. I covered college football and basketball. So when the season was over, I knew when that date was. I knew no Christmases. I went a good 8-year run with working on Christmas. And when I got to ESPN, I think the first 4 years I worked on Christmas, New Year's, and Christmas Eve, and Thanksgiving. So those are things that you have to realize is just part. That's just part of the job.
I think the other thing to add is that there are just as many men in this business who have faced that question as there are who are women. How do you juggle the demands of the job with whatever your life happens to present at the time? And so I like to ask men that question a lot and sort of hear what their answer is. But I think the bigger thing for me is that you have to, whether it's a marriage or whatever relationship you happen to be in, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, whatever life outside of work is, you have to take care of yourself, because you're not going to be able to do this job and do it well if you're not sort of taking care of yourself, which means whatever that means for you, you're going to need to do it, whether it means going to the gym, whether it means eating right, whether it means taking nice vacations, taking care of yourself, getting a mani-pedi, whatever it is that you need to sort of feed your own soul, you need to take the time to do, and not just be so completely focused on this that you forget who you are as a person. Okay.
I think one thing that I noticed is something that shapes a lot of your careers is the time that you spent working for newspapers, whether it was 5 years or 10 years. And I'm a really firm believer that you should work in newspaper because the deadlines and the grind and stuff is something that you're not going to find in the new media that we have now. And so for some of us who, there might not be 10 more years to work in a newspaper, just because, it's not going to be the same, and it's not the same now. And so I guess what advantages or disadvantages do you see to that, or how do you get around that? For people who want to come into the field and want to have the same experience, the same background of like having to meet those deadlines and having to, have that hustle, but not necessarily having to have to, with the mediums that we're working with now.
Well, I guess I might sort of propose that there is a different, that deadlines still exist. There's a little bit of a different sort of take on them. I mean, having worked in newspapers for so many years, you get to a place where you feel comfortable with the daily routine. You're thinking about the 6 o'clock Bulldog, the 9 o'clock Iowa issue, the 10 p.m. link, and then the midnight home, and we can chase at 1 o'clock if we need to. And you sort of train your mind to think in increments of days, or what's our Sunday story going to be. So you get that experience, which is great, but that doesn't necessarily evaporate once you change formats or platforms. In fact, it can intensify once you move to a digital platform. Suddenly you may be thinking in a matter of, what do I need to do in the next minute? What do I need to do in the next 5 minutes? What do I need to do in the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes or hour? And then it really is an instantaneous medium. So you can't sort of sit back and relax and think you're never on deadline, because the reality is you're always on deadline. It's 24/7. And if you're working on a digital platform, you have to be prepared to think of a deadline as an immediate, rather than, oh, I have until 6 o'clock, or I have until 9 o'clock, or I can chase something. It's constant.
I think it's important. I think what the newspaper business was, and when starting out, at the lowest level where you're taking calls from coaches and writing up little reports on games, it's that you're starting in a place where you can fail on a small stage. We're all going to fail. I mean, we're all going to have moments where we get the score wrong in the lead, or something like that. You don't want it to be when it's on SportsCenter. You want it to be right in a little area where nobody sees it and it goes away, and that never happened to me. So that, I think that's what's important. It's doing the grunt work. It's actually starting from the place where you learn the most, where you take your own stats at the football game. Whether you're writing that up for a website or you're writing it up for a newspaper, it's an invaluable experience. And you can't start in the middle. It's just, if you start in the middle and then you fail, that's it. You need to start and build the foundation from the career. That, especially I think for women, because you're going to be looked at in this industry sometimes like, oh, she got her job because of this, or she got her job because of that, and she doesn't really know what she's doing. Well, you do know what you're doing, because you did everything everybody else did to get there. There are no shortcuts for hard work and for learning and for basic arithmetic, right?
And that doesn't necessarily apply solely to sports reporting either. You learn how to write the weather off the weather wires.
I had to do that before. I'm like,
you're gonna have
just
to,
brought up a bad memory. Like, oh,
there's nothing more humbling and educational than to learn how to write an obituary. Write a story about somebody who you never knew, and you're on the phone suddenly with a family member asking all kinds of questions about someone you never knew. It's very humbling, but it's an amazing way to learn about how to be empathetic, how to understand, try to understand what other people are going through. I think there are things that you learn in the sort of, on the ground floor, or in Journalism 101, or in the early stages of your career, that will serve you for the rest of your life.
I was wondering, technology is moving so fast, and with Twitter and everything, and since we don't work on a 9-to-5 schedule anymore, it's 24/7, do you ever think technology will sort of move to a stage where reporters can't keep up, and we can't service everything on all the platforms of technology?
I think that it's an interesting question, but I think part of what's moving technology so fast is the reporters themselves. Is Jamel filing a story and us on the digital side producing it very quickly. We can't produce anything if we're not getting the content. And granted, there's a lot more reporters and there's a lot more content, but at the same time, I don't see the industry not being able to keep up because we're the ones who are running it.
I think it's more that it's made people's jobs a lot more 24/7. I mean, if you're a beat writer for a team, there is no off season anymore because something breaks at 2 a.m. on Twitter. If it's a big story, you're on it, and your deadline is now. So it's made it very much like, cat-like reflexes, no sleeping, that kind of thing. I think it makes it harder for individual reporters, for sure. But there's a hunger for the immediacy of news, and that's not going to slow down just because it's hard to do.
And I'll suggest too that it's inevitably, it will always be better to be right than to be first. Always. So whatever it takes to get it right, that's what you got to do. You can be first and be wrong, and people will remember that for the rest of your career. So it is always better to be right than to be first. Just my opinion.
Okay. What was the most difficult thing you faced being a woman in the industry, and how did you respond to that and end up learning from that situation?
Smell in the locker room is pretty bad. That's a pretty difficult thing to face as a woman.
Did you ever cover hockey?
Yes, I did. Oh,
It's the worst.
no. I mean, I think sometimes what you have to be prepared for is just, at least on my side of it, is you have to be prepared for the scrutiny as well as the reaction. Being a black female journalist, and unfortunately, the one statistic that study pointed out was that there are only 2 black female sports columnists in the country. I'm one, and the other one replaced me in Orlando. So that alone is going to make you stand out because people know who I am. So I can't really hide in the numbers. So you have to be prepared for a different level of scrutiny, sometimes an unfair level of scrutiny, and also the fact that everybody isn't cool with women reporting on sports. I get a lot of hate mail, hate tweets, and Facebook messages and all that kind of stuff. And you just have to have the opinion that that you just can't let it impact what you do on a day-to-day basis, because it's not like you're going to write something and change those people's minds. I mean, they're just going to think what they want to think, regardless. So certainly, one of the unsolicited piece of advice is to definitely have a thick skin, and you'll be able to disarm people a lot quicker if you don't respond or don't get angry about it, because they're just going to think what they're going to think. But early on in my career, it was a startling lesson to learn. I got my first piece of hate mail when I was in college. I'd written a column, and this guy wrote a very vile letter to me on some bathroom tissue or whatever. No, it wasn't, not the sandy stuff like kind of that, sandy stuff they used in public schools all the time. I was like, is he a serial killer? Like, I don't know. Like, it was.
I think really, more like prison. Public school.
Okay, you don't know my public school, okay? Maybe that's what it is. So there was this horrific letter to me because of something that he didn't like that I wrote, and it really jarred me. And then he started calling the newsroom, and I remember he got particularly upset about another column. It was like, you better watch your back because I'm out there. And I was like, oh crap, I gotta call the police. So it's sort of like, that was my first, real experience with, like, man, people out here get really riled up. They might not like me all the time. And you get over that, and you just gotta deal with it. And I think, Jane, you alluded to this, is that if we're gonna be in job situations or hear chatter in the industry that people are gonna assume when you walk in the room, if you're a woman, like, you got your job because of that. And being a black woman, you certainly feel, the affirmative action whispers and all that other stuff. But you just have to remain, confident in yourself.
Can I just say, if being a black woman gives you such an advantage in the job industry, how come there are only 2 of them?
Right. I like to point it out.
That's such an advantage, right? Like,
that's right. Clearly, I've lapped the field. Right. I'm more superior than you all, obviously.
Oh my God! It's a myth. It's such a myth.
Wait, it's the U.S. and Canada. That's what makes it so crazy. North America.
Like, all of you black women, both of you, are just taking everybody else's job.
We better never be in the same room together. I know her too, Shannon Owens. I was like, man, something happens to both of us. What will the world do?
I'm Cornell Manta, and I was just curious to know what your perspective is for someone entering into sports broadcasting world, as whether to go work for ESPN and be involved in that big of an industry, or kind of the difference of going for like a single sports team, like say working for the Rangers. Like, what would you say are the biggest differences in working for either company?
Michelle.
What do you want to do?
Sports broadcasting, like be on air.
On air? Yeah. I would not start at ESPN. I'll be quite frank in saying that's probably not an option if you don't have a lot of experience before you come to ESPN. And like Jane said, I'm going to echo her point as well, which is you don't want to have any mistakes be on SportsCenter that night, unless you want to be in the not top 10, which is always an option. So I would say, I would advise anybody that does want to be in front of the camera, the best thing I ever did was I started out in a small place. I started out in Chicago, which is a big market, but the station I was working for was an independent station that happened to have rights to White Sox games and actually some Cubs games, like the Cubs games that the tribute station didn't want. And they had a show that aired at 5 a.m. and I was on that show. And I was producing for that show and I was reporting for that show. And part of the reason that I got the job there was also that they had like a business component. So this business thing has kind of taken me to the right places. But I would highly recommend that you get a job where you can do a lot of different things, but not so obscure necessarily that people in larger places like ESPN will have no idea, what is this? I think that you should be able to start out of the gate. There's tons of websites right now that do have video and that are looking for young, hungry reporters to cover their teams. The NHL in particular, I think there are some teams, they get so little love from the national press that there are some teams I think that have hired their own reporters to cover them.
Yep.
Why not? I've always thought if I was starting out, I would, hit up the San Jose market or the Florida Panthers or something like that. So I would go small, but look for an online outlet that's covering a team that's known.
I would add one thing to that about starting out, not necessarily just broadcast, but also print and digital, is take those unpaid internships. They are, can I say sucks? They suck, kind of. You're not getting paid. It's hard. You do a lot of the kind of grunt work, and I think they're kind of being phased out as people. They will start to pay you a little bit, but if it's somewhere you really want to work, then do take the unpaid internship. When I started in New York, I worked at Good Housekeeping magazine. It was unpaid, and I worked in retail to support myself. And you just do it for a while, and it's not the most fun thing in the world, but also in this industry, it's about who you know, and it's a great way to meet people.
I'm going to be Stephen A. to your Skip right now. I would say do not take an unpaid internship. It just depends. It just depends, right? It worked out for you beautifully, and I've never taken an unpaid internship.
I would say neither have I. I've never been on an unpaid internship.
Neither have I.
I could never afford to take one. I would have
hard.
loved to
Let me
take
tell
one.
you, it was not fun, but it's another. It's not an option. It's hard to.
You can. It is
a lot of ways.
A lot of times in the business, it is about who you know and the context that you can develop. So if you can do that, you can get that out of it. But for me, I always just scoured the media marketplace, cast my net pretty wide, and in business journalism, the internships do tend to be paid. So I think that people pay you what they value you on some levels, and try to get a paid internship. But be agreed.
No. Well, and like I said, I think a lot of it's being phased out. I don't think that there are as many. It's not as prevalent as it used to be.
And you're not going to make a lot of the paid internship anyway.
Yeah,
That's true.
I go to Baylor, and Baylor doesn't necessarily have a broadcast journalism program, which is what I want to go into. So I took the public relations concentration. So can you guys talk about maybe how public relations ties into each of your fields in journalism, or maybe?
Well, that's a little tougher because it's a us versus them kind of situation. I met you, yes. It is not, of course, we all have to rely on PR people to some degree to set up interviews and that kind of thing, but the function of our jobs are completely different. Obviously, we're the good guys, they're evil, that goes without saying. But their interest is the best interest of whoever they're working for, be it a team, an athlete, an organization, a city, doesn't matter. Our interest is truth. And so those will always collide. And I understand you're in a unique situation because they don't offer what you want to go into. But you're at a point in your, number one, you don't necessarily have to major in journalism to be a journalist. There are plenty of sports journalists, plenty of journalists, period, who never majored in journalism and became, leaders in this industry. It's okay if you have to sacrifice and pick a side. Like, in this case, it has to be one or the other. Either you're going to be on the PR side or you're going to be on the journalism side. So I would say at this point, you're so early in your career, you can do that. You can recover. That's not to say that your concentration is meaningless, but if you want to be in front of the camera and want to pursue journalism, pursue journalism. And I know your school hasn't left you with a lot of options because they don't offer your concentration, but in your local area, like I think I talked to you about, like you already interned at your TV station. Spend what you learned there. If you got some clips if you got some things you put on camera, a reel, turn it into the next internship and then turn it into something else. I think if you've taken away anything from this panel, it's that this building a career to where one day, I guess you're sort of on this side of things, is a process. And you gotta be committed to the process. And so right now the process for you is getting reps, getting in front of the camera, taking those opportunities. And I'm a big proponent of going smaller to do more. So if there are small stations outside of your area that you can spend 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks in the summer, do that. Because that experience is gonna serve you well. That's gonna be your currency. That's what you guys are doing. You're collecting currency so you can trade up and get a better job. Because these sacrifices and the small steps you take now, that means maybe when you get out of college, you don't have to take a job in market number 152 and get paid $10,000 a year. You're trying to avoid that step right now by getting as much experience as possible. And
if I could just add to that, actually, in my role, I work solely on the business side with content, and I think working with the talent office some and being in their meetings and whatnot, I think what's interesting about public relations, what's happening more and more with today's journalists is they are their own brand, they're on Twitter, and it's more and more becoming something that we look at. I work alongside Rob King as his chief of staff, and when we look at the writers in his org through his editors and whatnot, I mean, it's something he's paying attention to, and your personality and whatever's coming through social media. So I wouldn't say that it's justifiable to major in a course of public relations in terms of how you can learn how to own and present your own personal brand. But if you're already taking those classes and whatnot, I think it is important to pay attention to the public relations around yourself and how you're kind of handling yourself as a journalist, because you're much more exposed.
And the only thing that I'll add to that is I think it's a lot of journalists consider taking jobs in public relations at the start, once you've gotten your journalism degree. And I would caution you against doing that right away, unless that's really what you want to make your career in, because it's very difficult to find a path back into journalism from public relations, especially once you get used to the paycheck that they give you in public relations.
Come on,
which is actually pretty decent.
And I think we just have time for one more question.
Hello, my name is Crystal Vasquez. I go to the Newborn School of Journalism from the University of North Texas. And my question has to do with finding your niche and making yourself valuable to a company. I myself found out at a very early age that I tell stories best through my humor, kind of like my sense of humor and parody. Is there any room at ESPN for kind of a comedic mind to tell stories in a way to make people laugh and understand?
Grantland.com?
No.
There is.
She's joking. It's a joke.
I'm joking. Grantland, absolutely.
Yeah.
plenty of places. Kenny Mayne.
Yeah,
oh my
I know.
gosh, Kenny Mayne.
And we have Playbook now. So Playbook was just the front of the magazine. Now it's a whole online venture. It's kind of taken the place of Page Two, which was traditionally like the humor part. But I mean, there's a lot of like totally off the wall awesome stuff.
And humor writing is very hard. It's very difficult.
Yeah. But good for you for finding like a passion and a voice and doing something that's like outside the mainstream. I think that's exactly what you want to do when you're finding a niche.
I think
the Sports Center commercials, those are just the funniest things.
Yeah, a great.
The commercial where one of the reporters is in LeBron James's chair and it's a throne. Like, I love stuff like that.
I think and Michelle mentioned the niche thing earlier. I think a great place to go to is Grantland.com. It's one of our ESPN websites to look at it to see these people are tied to the ESPN brand and they're reporting or they're talking about Scandal or they're talking about what's on TV. They're talking about the Oscars. They're talking about movies. They're talking about they're using humorous prose in their writing. That's a great place to look at to say, wow, this is a part of a sports entity, and how are they using their niches, music, and whatever their background is, to tie it to the sports world. It's a great place to go to get some ideas.
If you, and this will, I guess, sound like an odd plug given who we are, but like sites like Deadspin, they have internships, I know, and they write more of a snarky, comedic take on sports. So you look at a site like that and some of these other kind of mainstream blogs, that's exactly what they do, is from a humor, perspective, making fun of people and making fun of sort of the weird things observations you make in sports. So there's a lot I think Gawker Media is who Deadspin is owned by, so you might want to check them out as well.
There's a lot
Jezebel
of
too.
Jezebel, yep.
Jezebel.
There's a lot of nuanced humor though, also in the nightly writing that goes on among the Sports Center anchors.
Yeah.
And Scott Van Pelt is fantastic, and Steve Anderson. Those guys are Steve Levy. Those guys are genius. They're pros, and they weave humor into their scripts. Neil Everett is awesome. I mean, I just love to listen because I think, gosh, I'm gonna hear something great, but I'm going to hear something that's going to be almost sort of nuanced to the point where if I'm not really listening carefully, I'm not going to get it. And that's a real skill and a talent. And so I think what you're talking about is a real craft that is in demand. I mean, I would love to have more people who write like that.
All right, good plug.
I have nothing funny to say. But humor is the most underrated quality in the workplace. That's all.
Thank you, Michelle.
Well, let's give these folks big cheers. Thank you all.